everyone. Thank you all for being here at our first virtual youth conference. My name is Jerusha, and I'm the Violence Prevention and Community Education Supervisor at Halton Women's Place. On the screen, you'll also see Kristin Boyle. She works in the public education team as a public educator at Halton Women's Place. We're really excited to have so many youth and people from our community register for this conference. Your support means a lot, but more so because you've all signed up to educate yourselves about healthy relationships and the issue of dating violence. At Halton Women's Place, we fervently believe that education is the key to prevention, and that by creating awareness and providing education about warning signs and how to differentiate between a healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationship, this is effectively how we can end dating violence and violence against women. So thank you for joining our little movement through your participation and your willingness to learn by showing up today.
And just before we begin and we really get into the nitty gritty of the presentation, I do want to present a trigger warning and make sure that you understand that throughout this conference, there will be a lot of discussion around dating violence, specifically people's experiences with abusive relationships and the tragic consequences. So we know this may be very difficult for some of you to watch. So first, we want to make sure that you're engaging in self-care. If it is something that is worrying or triggering for you, please feel free to leave the conference or step away from your computer. We do have crisis workers from ROC on the call as well. So there are panels. We have Lindsay and Sabrina. And I want to be clear that when we say crisis workers, you don't have to be in a crisis in order to access their help. If something just isn't sitting right with you, or you have a question, or you just need to voice any concerns, please feel free to message me and I will put you into a breakout room with either Lindsay or Sabrina. Also, beyond just today, but if you need help at any point, please use the resources that I've saved on the screen. We want to make sure that they are what is right for you, what is inclusive, and making sure that you're getting the right information. So there's a number of different inclusive hotlines there that you can call. And again, you can ask them just for information or if you need support in other ways. And I'll keep those up at the end of the conference as well. So make sure you're engaging in self-care and taking care as we move through this conference.
Absolutely. So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Bill Mitchell. Bill is an author of the book When Dating Hurts, which details the story of his daughter, Kristin, which he will share today. He also recently launched a podcast and is an active advocate who seeks to educate people about the issue of intimate partner violence. Before Bill speaks, we will be showing a short video that Bill has put together in memory of his daughter, Kristin Mitchell.
Whenever I'm around you, I go home a little bit. There's just something about you where the pieces all fit. There's a lightness that surrounds you, and it guides me like a star. Oh, I am who I am because you are who you are. You put your hand in my hand, and I am made brand new. Somehow you just understand. You always know just what to do. And even when you are away, you're never all that far. Oh, I am who I am because you are who you are. The truth is this, and don't forget it, that my world's better 'cause you're in it. There's a lightness that surrounds you, and it guides me like a star. Oh, I am who I am because you are who you are. Oh, I am who I am because you are who you are.
Okay, so I'll pass it over to you now, Bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go into screen share here. Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Is everything good? Good. So yes, I put together the book When Dating Hurts, wrote it over the course of 4 years, and it came out on Amazon this past May. And I want to tell you the story about what happened with my daughter, but also to give you a sense of why things like this happen. Kristin, let's see if I can get this little guy to go here. Here we are. Kristin was not only a very smart person, but she was also very spiritual. She was very creative. She liked to write. She liked to write poetry. She liked to write prose. A great friend, somebody who's very loyal to her friends, loyal to her family, would do anything for her friends and family members, really. You see her on her graduation day. And that was May 14th, 2005, which I know for most of us on this Zoom meeting today, it seems like a very long time ago, of course. But when you have somebody so close to you that you love so much pass away, May 14th, 2005 feels really like yesterday, especially under the circumstances. The pictures you see there are graduation day. And graduation day for Kristin was a great and glorious day, honestly. She had completed 4 years in college. She had a job lined up with General Mills, a great big company. She had a good job lined up. May 14th was wonderful. It was a real highlight. But that day that you see pictured there was actually the last day that our family ever saw her alive. And I'll talk more about that. The picture on the left is my son, David, and Kristin, and then Michelle, who's my wife, and me. Back then on the right is my wife and my daughter, Kristin. Let's see here. She was lovely. She was a lot of fun. She had a great sense of humor. I think the picture on the left taken in her dorm room kind of underscores that she really was fun. She wasn't all study. Very generous person. Somebody who was always very much in fashion, but she really brightened up a room every time she came in. Let's see if this little guy here. These pictures were taken about 20 days after the previous pictures, the graduation pictures. This is June 2nd, 2005. And these were selfies that Kristin took. She had spent that day, June 2nd, 2005, away from her boyfriend. She had been dating a guy for about 6 months. And I should go back and say that the pictures taken on her graduation day, the one with the four of us as family members, were actually taken by a guy that she had been dating roughly 6 months. These pictures were actually taken when she was with a couple of other college grads that she had spent most of her last full day with. So these pictures were actually, that you see lined up here that I photoshopped together, they were taken 3 or 4 hours before she was killed by her boyfriend. Now, we didn't know at that time really much of anything about dating violence. I'd never heard that term before. At that time, I'd never heard of intimate partner violence. I knew what domestic violence was, but really, I couldn't have really given a thorough discussion about what that was as well. If I were to be asked today, what is dating violence? I would describe it in this way. And I didn't write this, but I found this and I thought it was so strong. But I'd refer to it as a widespread epidemic of pain and suffering that leads to a lifetime of broken dreams. And I'm going to read that again, but think about it, especially under these pandemic situations that we have nowadays. You know what a pandemic is. You probably know what an epidemic is. But dating violence is a widespread epidemic, and it's pain and suffering. When you get into a relationship like this, there's so much that goes wrong with it. And a lifetime of broken dreams for those that are emotionally abused or physically abused. Most people carry that the rest of their lives. And I know in our case, it didn't happen directly to me because my daughter was the one that was killed, but it happened to our family. And what I mean is that we definitely are feeling that lifetime of broken dreams because we had our hopes pinned on so many things that Kristin was going to do the rest of her life. She was only 21 when this happened to her. Now, one of the things that I think is really important in a discussion like this is to talk about the warning signs of an unhealthy relationship, because the warning signs are things that you could spot or your friends could spot if you're in a relationship with somebody that can save you. Because if you start to see these warning signs, especially when you start to see them mount up, those are red flags that tell you something's not right and you need to know more about what's going on. And I'll take you through some of those. The key to warning signs is that they all fit under one big umbrella, and that is power and control over another person. That's what the warning signs all indicate. It's supposed to be this intimate partner relationship. It's supposed to be two people who think they're in love or on the verge of being in love, but they want to have this relationship of some kind. But what's actually going on is that one partner is trying to exercise more power and control. One partner doesn't want an equal relationship where they both come together and make decisions. One person wants to make all those decisions and wants to influence the behavior of the other person all the time in all facets of their lives. And what I thought it would make a lot of sense was just to review some of the more classic warning signs. So, and I will guarantee you that as I go through the list, you'll say, wow, I feel like I've seen that. I've seen that at some point in my life. You may have seen it earlier today or this week. But let me take you through a few of these. What makes sense with power and control is somebody who exhibits controlling or dominant behavior over another person. It's somebody who finds sometimes subtle ways, sometimes not as subtle, to try to force that other person to do what he or she wants in a relationship. Someone who exhibits extreme jealousy or possessiveness. The guy that was dating my daughter was all about jealousy. He was jealous. He didn't really want her spending time with her family members. He didn't want her spending time with her friends. It was all about him all the time. And when she was away, he would try to insert himself through text messages and phone calls and all kinds of things. And we'll talk about that too. It can be, not always, but it can be somebody who just keeps delivering constant put downs over another person. It's somebody that maybe has some kind of nasty, edgy nickname for somebody else. You know, it's somebody who is just looking for those opportunities, again, to find some power and control, to make the other person's self-esteem go down, 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 and get even greater control. Somebody who maybe tries to isolate you from your family and friends, which kind of goes with jealousy in many ways. And the guy that dated my daughter, he was all about that. He was all about that. They reached the point where they just felt like, they kept saying to my daughter, Kristin, you need to get a little space from that guy. You know, you need to have other things in your life besides him. Somebody that's always checking your cell phone or your emails and texts without your permission. In this case, and we know he did this, there were instances where Kristin might have her computer out and she might be on Facebook, but she goes off to go make some food or she leaves the room or something like that. This guy actually, in some instances, would go on there and read her instant messages. And in some case would actually go on and make believe he was her and then then reach out to her friends and say, hey, what do you think about, and mention his name. I used the name Nick in the book, so I'll just use that. His name is not actually Nick. But he would go on there and say, hey, what do you think about Nick? How do you feel about him? Do you like him? And things like that, and make sure Kristin wasn't around, figuring that no one would ever know that it really wasn't Kristin. But he was good at getting her phone when she wasn't around, or he was the kind of guy that might say, well, if we're boyfriend and girlfriend, I should have your password to your phone, shouldn't I? Isn't this like a, good trusting relationship? Of course, he really couldn't be trusted in the meantime. Somebody constantly checking up on you by way of calls and text messages. So if she was out with her other friends, he was always trying to find different ways to come into the conversation. He might not be there physically, but he would be texting in, and then he'd demand answers right away. The kind of guy that would just keep calling. And Kristin was with her mother at one particular day, and just was constantly getting phone calls from, and he'd come up with, hey, what do you want to have for supper tonight? I can pick some things up. Then he'd call later. Well, what are you doing now? And all this. He just would not stop. These are warning signs. There's somebody who makes you feel that nobody else would ever want you. Now, you saw pictures, you saw the video of Kristin. Kristin was a very precious young lady, but this guy would kind of insert himself. And we know that he would try to find new and improved ways of telling her that, you're not all that great. Okay. You need a guy like me around you. Somebody making you feel no one else would ever want you. That's what that is. It's pulling you down all the time, making you feel you can't do anything right, which some people, and maybe the Halton people can talk about it later, but there's something called gaslighting. And gaslighting is a style of behavior that tries to keep the partner off balance, tries to make that other person feel like they're making mistakes, or sometimes if they make mistakes, making a really big deal out of it. But somebody trying to throw you off, again, lower your self-esteem, belittle you in some ways. And somebody, of course, that constantly tells you what to do. They tell you what to do. They tell you how to do it. They tell you when to do it. And sometimes the partner who's being abused finds that it's better just go along with it, and this person will quit bothering you about it. The truth of it is, if you go along with it, you enable more of it. So you can just see, again, this is an unhealthy relationship. Someone preventing you from doing what you want to do. If you like to play tennis, if you like to ride horses, these other things you used to do all the time, or learn how to play guitar, this other person will probably make fun of it. This person will make it difficult for you to do those things. And you find after a while that all you're going to do is what this difficult partner wants you to do. And the last one on the list for now is somebody who's just lying about practically everything. Somebody that wants to set you up in a false world where you don't know what's right after a while. Somebody who's very, very practiced at this, very crafty with this, and you're never really sure what's going on. And the fact of the matter is, my daughter didn't know the warning signs. So she was pretty much trapped in an invisible jail cell with this guy in her life. And she didn't know what these warning signs are, and she definitely didn't know what could happen with that. Now, on that June 2nd day, the one that had all the selfies on it, she spent the most of that day with a couple of guys that she graduated from St. Joseph's University. This is in Philadelphia in the United States. But she spent most of that day with a couple of guys she'd gone all the way through business school. And she told this boyfriend, who she had just about had it with at that point, in fact, so bad she had taken away his security card and taken away his keys. But she had said, look, I'm going to spend the day with my two friends, and that's it. I probably won't see you. And that's the way it's going to be. And she was just trying to exercise, her own free will, which she wasn't feeling very much of. So she went through a whole day of his phone calls and text messages, and even found a way to show up anywhere where she was with these other guys at a restaurant. But he just wouldn't stop. And by the end of the day, she was so frustrated. So at the end of that day, she sent me an email, and this is it. And I'm not going to take you through the whole thing, but you see, again, it's June 2nd. It's 11:33 in the evening, and she sent this email. And I had just written to her about, being so excited about the job she had lined up. That's what she says. Thanks for the inspirational email. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to point out that when I saw this, I took it as she's having a difficult time, but she was excited about the job that was coming up and things like that. And she was happy to get looking for some advice from me. She mentions that in the very last sentence. Hope to hear back from you with advice. The main reason for showing you this, though, is to show you that I didn't know any better at that time, because I didn't know about warning signs either. But what you will see when these start to show up here are warning signs that kind of jump off the page, because she says something like, as far as that day had gone, she had had a fight with him, a fight tonight, because he was acting really jealous about the fact that she had been with their friends all day. And in this case, fight, she just means had an argument. But kept calling me and not trusting me all day. So you can see the relentless phone calls that we just talked about with the warning signs. Really annoying. And that's another key warning sign. Somebody who is always bothering you and getting under your skin all the time. Not a healthy, loving relationship. Somebody who is acting mad all the time. That's another thing. The idea is that he would act mad, and therefore she's supposed to then acquiesce and act nice so he wouldn't act mad. That's a controlling technique. And then she started to use a phrase that her friends had used on her, I found out later on. And that was the idea of having to have space, or needing space from him. And her friends felt she needed to have space from him. She needed to have some objectivity about this guy. They felt they could see him for the way he was, but she was having a difficult time seeing him for the way he was. Let's see, here's one or two more. Seemed to be getting more and more controlling. I mean, that is like the definition of warning signs, somebody who's a controlling person in a relationship. And again, she says for the second time, not giving me space to be me. Now that was 11:33 on June 2nd. That's late in the day. And almost exactly a half an hour later, I wrote back and I said to her, because I had to go to work the next day, but I happened to spot her email. I saw your email, so I'll hold off on sleep to respond here. But if you really like, and I mentioned his name, and then I just kind of had what I call this nice dad type of email, reassuring that he's important, but not important than your friends. He needs to hear and understand that having friends doesn't mean you like him any less. And in the end, I just say things like, just be honest with him and it should all work out. Love, Dad. Kiss, kiss, hug, hug, this type of thing. But you can see in this that Kristin didn't know what to look for. Her friends, as it turned out, saw different things. They saw things that bothered them. They didn't particularly like him. But on the other hand, they didn't know that these warning signs were there jumping at them to pay attention to, and just really, didn't take it for what it is. They actually wanted to do an intervention with her that weekend. And that last email I sent to her was early on a Friday morning. The template that every abuser follows. I spoke with a lot of people over the years. This all happened 15 years ago, and I've spoken with a lot of people. And a few years ago, I picked up on the fact that there was a complete template or pattern to everybody I spoke with who had been abused. And it's just 5 parts. And this template held up, this pattern held up every time. They always seem to start out with this kind of storybook romance. It's the kind of guy that takes you to places you've never been to before. The type of person that maybe you go out one night and the next day you go to work or you go to school or wherever you are, and literally, 2 bouquets show up. And it's like, wow, I've never been treated like this before. But this person is practiced in this. This isn't the first time out for this person. This person knows that it's all about lavishing and doing things and giving, giving, giving. And this could go on for a few days. This could go on for weeks. But what kind of comes with it is, it's kind of like, okay, I'm doing all these things and I'm treating you just great. So the focus is on me, right? And you don't necessarily get what's going on in the very beginning, but that is what's going on. Remember, this is not a healthy relationship. This is abusive, but it kind of is this drawing in tactic. And then at some point in time, it may take a while, could take months, could take weeks, not the first date, that there are threats of violence. It's somebody that kind of tells you, it's like, I got to tell you, when you talk to me like that, and this is the abuser speaking, when you talk to me like that, it kind of triggers me, it kind of reminds me of the way my mother used to talk with me, years ago, and it used to really make me mad. And when you say stuff like that, I could just slap you, and I wouldn't do that to you, of course. But boy, it really gets on my nerves. And that's a message to the person being abused. Wow, I don't want to go down that path. I don't want to have him do that. I got to watch the way I handle myself. I have to tippy-toe around this person. But that becomes another kind of lever to make you fall in line in this relationship. Okay, so that will go on. There are people who slam on the brakes in the car and you get jerked ahead and that person yells at you and you've been put on notice. These are all warning signs. These are all red flags. And in a lot of relationships, it then turns to actual violence. Somebody does get slapped. Somebody gets punched in the arm pretty darn hard. Sometimes somebody gets strangulated. Somebody gets pushed down a flight of steps or shoved into something or has something thrown at them. And what typically comes behind that, if the relationship continues, is some kind of convincing apology. The person might say something like, look, I feel bad about what happened, but what you said, you reminded me of some bad times in my life when I was abused. And I know, I probably shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry about it. Look, why don't we move on? This is the first time this has ever happened to me where I've done this. And, can't we get past this? Can't we get past this somehow? And if you like this person, if you're hanging in there, if you're trying to make it work, you might figure, well, I guess anybody can have a bad day. My arm still hurts or whatever happened, but let's go. And then what happens is then we go back to storyboard romance at the very top. And maybe this person takes you to an even better place. This person, depending on, where this relationship is and how old you are, person all of a sudden buys you a better cell phone, or this person takes you to some other place, does something, behaves extremely well, cooks you a meal, depending on, what can happen. But what happens is you have to understand that this pattern keeps happening so that we go through storyboard romance. And then before you know it, you're seeing less and less of your family and friends. Then comes some more threats of violence. So you're thinking, oh God, we're back into that stuff again. Maybe more violence again, different apology. There are people, this isn't all just dating violence. There are people who get into this kind of a relationship and one day they get married. It doesn't clear up and get better. It keeps going. They get married. They may have children. This stuff is still going on. I know people, and I'm not kidding you, that have had this going on for 20 or 30 years with that same person. And it's horrifying. The idea is when you start to see this type of thing in a relationship that your friend is in, that a family member's in, that maybe you're in, that you look at this and say, oh my God, this sounds like one of those. And I gotta get out of this before I get in too deep, or I have to help my friend. And I can talk about how you'll help your friend. And maybe that's what we should do next year. Because the question is, what do you do if this is happening to you? Chances are, if it's happening to you, you'll have a more difficult time in understanding it's happening than, let's say, if it were happened to a friend of yours, because you would notice your friend is changing. Your friend used to have all this time for you, and this friend all of a sudden seems like they're not having any time. And this guy is, or whoever it is in this relationship, because it can be men and women, can be women and women, guys and guys. This spans, every possible combination of people in a relationship like this. But the question is, what do you do? Let's say if you or a friend gets caught up in an unhealthy relationship. Well, what I always tell people is if you see this happening, and again, it's easier when it's happening to a friend or a family member, you have to do something. You can't say, wow, that sounds like one of those things. I sure hope it comes to an end on its own. I say you have to do something. You cannot ignore it. You cannot wish that it would go away. It probably won't go away. Chances are it just won't. And you have to understand and ask yourself, could this situation get worse? Unfortunately, when relationships are unhealthy and they continue, they tend to get worse. And what I mean by worse is that whatever's happening that's unfortunate tends to happen more frequently. Or if somebody's getting hurt, they tend to get hurt worse, or they get hurt more frequently. So these things tend to go in the wrong direction. They don't just tend to clear up and all of a sudden it's storybook romance and doesn't change from that. If this is happening to a friend of yours, there's two things that I would suggest very strongly. If it's happening to a friend, try to talk to your friend. But there are two things I really implore you to do. And one of them is to listen to your friend. You want to get your friend to talk about it, but also believe your friend, because you might be hearing things you think aren't possible. And if your friend says, listen to me, this really happened, I'm telling you now, make the mistake of believing your friend. It is not your job to judge it. It is not your job to push back. Your job is seriously to try to draw your friend into talking about it. Because the only way your friend, or if it's happening to you, or if it's happening to your sister, but the only way that person gets out of that relationship is when they want to get out of that relationship. They have to want to get out, and they have to want to get out really badly. You cannot force somebody to get out of a relationship like this. In fact, most people who try to force people to get out of relationships actually accidentally draw them back to push in and get into that relationship even more, because they feel like they're in the relationship and they have to justify it. And oftentimes what they'll do is they'll go back to the abuser and say, wow, my friend's giving me a bad time about going out with you. And this guy then will try harder to make sure that other person's out of the picture. So you can accidentally make it worse. You don't want to do that. The other thing is that in the midst of all the listening and the believing, you also want to get help. And one way of helping is to let your friend know, let's say it's happening to a friend in this case, let them know they're not alone. They need to know they're not alone. They need to know what's happening is not their fault. And if it's happening to you, it's not your fault. No one deserves to be treated like this. It isn't like you did something and now you should be abused. You need to know if it's happening to you, you're not the one to be blamed. Okay. What I'd also like to talk about is what not to do. And these are things that most of us may do just accidentally. If this were happening to a friend of yours, you may think, to just kind of keep quizzing this person because, this guy said to listen to him. You don't want to do that. You just want to bring them along. Like if somebody's saying something like, wow, this thing is happening, your job then is to say, well, tell me about it. That way you're not challenging that person. You're not supposed to be a detective, who's trying to pull things out of people. You just want them to talk and form the ideas themselves. If that person's talking, let them talk. Don't interrupt them. It is not your job, even though you may feel it is not your job to solve the problem. Seems hard to believe, but that's not your job. Your job is for them to solve their own problem, okay? Now, you want them to go and get real live help. And that means like people like Halton Women's Place, domestic violence agencies. Maybe if you're in school, you're looking at school counselors, or maybe go to a teacher and say, look, I got a friend and my friend's going through this thing. Who can I talk with here? If you don't know, though, you want to find those type of people. Let's see, what do we have here? Another thing that's kind of a real temptation if your friend is going through this is you kind of get angry that this is happening. You almost want to jump on your friend and say, well, how could you be so stupid? How could you let this happen to you? So you wind up pouncing on them and then you become aggressive about it. Or maybe you think, well, I'm going to go find this person that's doing this to you, and I'm going to set this person straight. These things don't work. They don't work. It's been time tested. Getting angry at your friend accidentally practically makes you another abuser. That person doesn't need more of that. That person needs comfort. That person needs help. Becoming aggressive or judging your friend or saying, if you don't leave that person, I don't want to talk to you anymore. That's not helping at all. That's the opposite of helping. Maybe sometimes, let's say this is happening to your sister, you're some guy at home, this is happening to your sister, and you think you're going to go find the guy that's doing this stuff. That's when people really get hurt. And sometimes you're trying to go and do the right thing, or you're trying to make this relationship come to an end, and somebody winds up getting seriously hurt. Doesn't typically work out very well. It's very easy because I can understand this. I mean, if I had been presented this back when this happened to my daughter, I probably would have gotten frustrated if I had known about it. Now we live outside of Baltimore, Maryland, and this happened to my daughter in Philadelphia. That may not mean very much to you, but they're 125 miles apart. And we did have some phone calls with Kristin, but she never led on to what was happening. So a lot of things I'm saying I've learned about from talking really with hundreds of people over the course of time. And every one of them will say they became very frustrated with the person who was being abused. But what you don't want to do is get frustrated if things don't clear up quickly. I know that if this were happening to my daughter and I heard about it, I want it to be over with now. I don't want this thing to drag out. I don't want her hanging around this person. So it's very hard to stay cool. It's hard sometimes to be patient with it. The best thing is to get professional help. Go to somebody who really knows this stuff, somebody who can really coach you. What do we have here? And, once again, it's a very emotional time for those who are in on what's going on. But another thing you don't want to do is forget that it's about the feelings of the survivor. Sometimes it's very easy to forget that it's about the feelings of the victim and not your own feelings. I can understand that. The whole focus is really on the person this is happening to. It's very tempting in conversations like this to spend the entire time talking about unhealthy this and that and things going wrong and all this kind of dark and negative stuff. But I thought it was great when I found this, what's on the screen here, which I'll read, kind of looking at the bright side of the way things actually are supposed to be. And that is that everyone deserves a healthy relationship that's safe from violence and fear. And the best way to have that, and the best way to protect yourself and your loved ones from an abusive situation is by learning the warning signs. And, I tell people, if you feel like you are in love with somebody, or somebody who feels like they're in love with somebody, if you're in love with somebody, there shouldn't be any fear about that relationship, because fear is the absence of love. I think that's an important thing to underscore. Let's see. Once again, do something. Talk with a school counselor. I guess in summertime, it's not as easy to do that, but search out help. It's so easy to find domestic violence helplines, and they don't charge for these kinds of conversations. You can go at your own rate. If your friend's going through something, it's a great idea maybe to call one of those lines and talk. It's a great idea if your friend is willing to do this, your friend who's being abused, to sit on a call, let both of you just put it on speakerphone and talk with the helpline. You can hang up anytime you want. If it gets to be too much for your friend, that's fine. But you want to kind of help move this thing along, but you can't force it on the other hand. If possible, depending on the relationship you have with your parents, or some aunt and uncle, or somebody in your neighborhood, but talk with other people if possible. They'll probably have some good ideas too, and they obviously care about the outcome. I mentioned before, if this is happening to a friend of yours, to try to listen and to believe what that person's telling you is going on, and remaining patient and supportive to that other person. These things are all easier to say. You're disappointed if your friend gets into a relationship like this. You feel bad about it. You don't want this to be like this. You want to get back to those happier times with your friends. But sometimes you have to kind of weather these type of things. And that, I believe, is the show.
Okay, thank you so much, Bill. I want to we really appreciate, you coming in to talk with us and share your personal experiences with us. And I know we share a mission in terms of educating on relationships, whether unhealthy or, again, like you said, the positivity and seeking out those healthy relationships.
Sure.
And doing that through prevention. So it's so valuable. And thank you for spending your time with us today.
You're welcome.
We're just going to have a little time for Q&A. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask, sorry, I'm just going to bring this back up. If anybody has any questions, then please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you are brave enough to unmute yourself, then please do. And we will have a few minutes for that.
I would just like to make a comment, if I could, just to say thank you so much. It's a great offering. It's a topic that somehow we shy away from because it's not an easy thing to admit that you are actually in a relationship where someone is harming you, especially when people look at you as having capacity to know better, to have people around you in your life that should be able to help you. And, I don't know if you can speak to it, but what is the driving force that keeps someone tethered to someone like that, especially when they know it's not healthy? What is your sense about that, or learning or observations?
Well, I think the thing is with that again is that all these situations are so different, but if you can see if you can get your friend to talk about it, and just you kind of want to ask those leading questions like, well, tell me about the relationship a little bit. And then when you hear something maybe that seems uncomfortable, something that your friend doesn't feel good about, you can say, well, and it sounds like really like psychology type questions. You say things like, well, how did that make you feel? Or how long has that been going on? Or do other people know about that? I think that if you ask those kinds of questions, they're great because you want to get your friend to talk. And so you want to look for those openings to get your friend to think and talk about it. One of the other things I would say is that if you can get your hands on some pamphlets about the warning signs and some other advice like that, sometimes if you say, look, I want to give this to you, you read it when you want to, read it when you're comfortable. You may take days before you even want to look at it, but you want to put things in their hands, and you don't necessarily want to be there when they're looking through these things, but you want to kind of like feed them information. So again, they can arrive at their own decision that this relationship, you hope they arrive at the decision that this relationship is not something they want to take forward. I will tell you, I had an instance on a phone call with a high school senior a couple of years ago. I talked with her mother, and her mother finally got her to get on the phone with me. And this young woman was doing all she could to defend the relationship, even though I knew it was very unhealthy. I don't think he had gotten physical with her, but he had pulled every other trick in the book. And at one point I said to her, I just have a question for you. And that is that, do you think that this relationship with this young guy, this high school senior friend of yours, do you think looking ahead over the next year, 2 years, whatever it is, do you think in your life that this relationship is the best you can do? Meaning, like, do you think there's nobody else? Maybe you don't know that person now, but do you think that you'll never meet another person who could make you this happy and maybe even happier without some of the other things that go with it? Because the actual threats of violence were there, and the power and control parts were there. This guy played all kinds of mind games about going to a prom and who's friends. And I mean, if she spoke with another guy in school, this guy would be all over her. So it's clearly not healthy. But when I gave her that question and I said, don't tell me the answer, just think about it. Do you think he's the best you can do? I found out a couple months later that made the difference. So you kind of want to put those thoughts in their head, I think.
Thank you. I have one more question that we were emailed last week.
Good.
So if you find yourself stuck in a situation where you know someone who has been hurt due to dating violence, how do you let go of self-blame? How do we kind of take care of ourselves and not feeling guilty or blaming ourselves for not realizing sooner?
Okay, let's see if I understand you. So do you take that as that this happened to a friend and now you're feeling guilty it happened to a friend?
Yeah, in that we might not have seen the signs for our friend.
Oh. Well, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people who felt that way about my daughter's situation. Um, that's a tough one because they really shouldn't feel blame at all. You know, and if you know what the warning signs are and you don't act upon it, I can understand where you might feel that way. If you did not know what they were, then I think you're pretty innocent. You know, I mean, there were plenty of things that we didn't know at this house. Kristin's friends were around this guy the better part of 6 months. They didn't like him. They thought he was difficult. They thought a lot of things about him that weren't very positive. Most of them just tried to ignore or get away from him, to make themselves unavailable, which again, from his standpoint was perfect because he was about isolation. But I would just urge people to try and, I mean, I don't know, try not to feel guilty or bad about it. I think the best thing to do is put better actions ahead. You know, if you knew about the warning signs, you didn't act, I can understand that too, because it's really tricky. You know, sometimes, especially I think if you're in high school, you don't have a whole lot of experience with dealing with these heavy problems like this. You know, you don't have a lot of the coping skills that maybe you'll have later on in a few years, maybe through going to university or, later in life. I don't think it's about beating yourself up about it. I think it's about taking the next opportunity that comes along and trying to act on it and help.
So thank you. And we have a question in the chat as well. So how can we end a relationship without causing some kind of backlash, causing them to do something to hurt someone?
So do you take that as ending a relationship that you were in or your friend is in?
That you were in.
Yeah, those are tricky. I'll say the first part, which is going to sound like I'm not going to answer it, but I really will. The first thing I would say, again, is get together with domestic violence counselors in this case, because breaking up with somebody, especially if somebody's very controlling, can be and usually is the most dangerous time. I mean, you have to treat it like this could get as bad as you can imagine, because you don't know what that other person's going to do. You know, you don't want to break up alone with that person. The woman who prosecuted the case, this guy eventually killed my daughter. But I said to her at one point in time, to the prosecutor, I said to her, "What would you tell someone to do?" And she said, I don't expect everybody could do this, but I'd call that person up and in about 30 seconds explain, we're done, we're over with, and I will have nothing to do with you. And she said, if possible, try to get away from that person for 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, just take yourself out of circulation. Now, that's not so easy when you're in the midst of a school year. You know, maybe now it's easy to be away from people with COVID, but typically you can't just drop out of school, but you want to cut that person off completely. You want to tell your friends, I'm having nothing to do with that person. If you can, you tell your parents, so this person doesn't show up at the door. But you have to completely take yourself out of it, and it has to be zero tolerance. Mm-hmm. So it takes planning. You can't just decide today I want to break up and then execute that plan tonight if you're dealing with somebody who is so powerful and controlling and volatile, because it is the most dangerous time. And I mean, there are a lot of people that never saw what was coming that actually came, and someone really got hurt, if not killed. Mm-hmm. So I know that all sounds terrifying, but I'd rather scare you a little bit now and have you get real help and say, walk me through what can happen, help me formulate a plan. I know I need to let other people in on this plan. I mean, you probably have to get a different cell phone number. I know where I live, if you call up and say you're in a relationship like this, they'll change your number. They weren't going to charge you anything for it because it's a dangerous situation. But you have to take a number of steps, and you have to expect the worst, and you have to act on it, and you have to stay ever vigilant. These people don't typically just let this go. They don't just typically say, oh, I'm sorry, it didn't work out. Okay. They don't expect that to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice, especially we know, especially with Halton Women's Place, we have counselors who will help any survivors through safety planning.
Right.
You can also find safety planning online. There's a number of crisis centers you can reach out to, and I can put some in the chat for you as well if you'd like, so that we know what a safety plan looks like. And I would encourage people to have a look and research that. In the situation, if you are in an unhealthy or abusive relationship. And I think just one more, how do you approach your friend if she is distancing herself?
I think what you want to tell your friend, if your friend seems to all of a sudden or over the course of time not have anything to do with you, I think you want to say, look, I don't know everything about what you're going through right now, but I'll always be here for you. I'll always be your friend. You have my phone number. If you just want to talk, if you want to just take a walk, go walk around a field somewhere or walk around the track at school or whatever that is. But I think you want to communicate to that person somehow that they don't have to go through this all alone. You want to make yourself available. And I would probably share it with my friends and say, look, I'm really worried about her, because this starts to sound like one of these relationships that could go bad. So as tempting as it is to say, well, if you're not going to have anything to do with me, I'm not going to have anything to do with you, and just kind of get out of there. You don't want to do that. You have to leave the door open. These things can go to a bad place, but these things could also come back to a good place. And you want to be that friend that doesn't give up on your friend.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bill. Yeah, like as I said before, this has been amazing to have you here. I think it's so valuable for everyone. And thank you all for the questions that you were asking as well.
Great. Happy to do this.
I echo that. Thank you, Bill. That was really powerful and informational. So thank you for providing that for everyone.
My pleasure.
So we've been honored at Halton Women's Place to have youth from across Halton join our Youth Ambassador program. And these are young people ages 13 and up who want to participate in educating their peers about healthy relationships. And they've been instrumental in developing our campaign this month for Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. So we are about to show you a video our ambassadors put together, and we'll be launching this video next week. So you got a sneak peek today.
Dating abuse is really common amongst teens. About 1 in 3 high school students have been or will be involved in an abusive relationship. An abusive relationship is when one partner tries to have power or control over the other. Abuse isn't always physical, it can be emotional too.
When you are young and dating for the first time, sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between when a guy or a girl wants to be around you all the time because they really like you,
Or if it's because they're trying to have control over you. Let's talk about some dating myths to help you figure out the difference. Myth 1. It is a good idea to give my boyfriend or girlfriend the password for my phone, email, or social media account. I don't have anything to hide. It'll prove to them that they can trust me. False. Never have to give your password to anybody, including the person you're dating. Your email account, your social media accounts are all private accounts, and you have the right to keep them private. Giving your partner your passwords will not make you closer or show how much you trust them.
your partner needs to respect your personal space and your privacy and not invade it.
Awesome.
So in the next coming weeks, we're going to have 4 of those videos, those myth videos, where we try to dispel some myths that young people may have about dating, where we romanticize unhealthy behaviors. So we're really happy to have so many youth across Halton really want to be a part of this movement to educate their peers. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I know we're going to move now into a short but fun Kahoot. That's been put together by Kristin and some of our youth ambassadors again. And Kristin, there are 4 gift cards that are available to be won. But Kristin, you can get started.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So everyone, if you're still with us, I know we're kind of going over time, but I'm so happy that everyone is still with us. And now we can win some prizes. So I will go to kahoot.it and I'll put up the code for you in a second. So our first place prize is a $50 Amazon gift card. Second and third are $25 Amazon gift cards. And our fourth gift card is going to be for the first youth to sign up for our conference today. So yeah, let's get kahooting. Oh, someone just like got in there at the last minute. It's perfect. Ooh, awesome. All right, let's see. We're going okay. This is very exciting. This is my first Kahoot, so I'm just like, it's very exciting. Okay, Arish, you are on the top of our leaderboard. Okay. Ooh, still leading the way. And people moving on up. That's great. Those are quick answers. Everyone knows. Okay.
That's why Kristin and I are wearing orange.
Yep. A little subliminal there. Ooh. Hey.
That's a bit of a tricky one because all of them are good traits, but the like central one that everything flows from is equality.
Oh. Nicole, keeping that place. Okay. Nice. Two more questions left. Okay, last one. All right, so let's see who is on our podium. Sarah. Rachel. Awesome. Great. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you everyone for your involvement in that. And we also hope, while it is a kind of lighthearted way to talk about a really difficult issue, we hope that it was also a learning experience. I think for me, some of those statistics are incredibly shocking and make me want to, will continue to do what I do on a daily basis. So I hope we all have that moving forward as well. So I'm going to leave you with, actually, if I can, before I forget. So Sarah, Rachel, and Maya, if you can private message me your emails, please, so that we can make sure you get your gift cards, that would be fantastic. All right, and so, okay, so I'm just gonna leave these resources up on the screen for you. And Sabrina has also put the ROC resources in the chat. So make sure that you keep that, whether it's for you or a friend, or you just want more information, such a valuable resource to access. And again, while we might be saying crisis counselors, that does not mean that you can only call these places when you're in a crisis. It can be someone to talk to, it can be a conversation, it can be more information, as I said. So please take advantage of that. And I want to make sure that we know which even hotlines or hotlines will work for us the best, because we want to make sure that we are reaching out to the most inclusive hotlines for anyone that can help us for our situation as well. Mm-hmm. And so I am going to, just before you say your final piece, Jerusha, I am also going to say on the next slide, if you could please complete our survey, there will be a QR code that you can just open your camera and take that, or I'll put the link in the chat, but it is just for us to understand how we can improve this, and also just to give us some feedback. It'll take about a minute, literally a minute of our time. I did it earlier. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I just want to thank all of you for being here today and taking the time to learn and educate yourselves about this issue. And again, thanks to Bill for being here. Bill has been really supportive of Halton Women's Place and has been so instrumental in helping us to educate and create awareness. So we're so happy to have this partnership with him.
Me too. I am too. Thank you.
And together, for everyone that came out for this conference today, came out, we're all in a stay-at-home order right now. But together, this is how we can end dating violence and change the statistic that 1 in 3 youth will experience abuse. So this information can be potentially life-saving for not just you, but someone you know, a friend, a family member, anyone. So share this information with your family and friends, have these conversations, so that way everyone is informed and know what it means to have a healthy relationship. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I hope you all have an amazing long weekend. Well, for us in Canada, sorry, Bill. But, and we will hopefully see you again soon. So many thank yous in the chat. It feels so, feels so nice.
Very nice. Thank you.